Before we start to work with the actual exercise, let's review some things we may have forgotten or may not have even known in the first place. In fact, we haven't talked about dates yet in our lessons. We're going to get to that in the very next lesson on formatting. So if you're working your way through this course from beginning to end, one video after another, then you haven't been introduced to this concept yet. So here it is. To Excel, every date is a serial number. You could type a date in a cell, but all Excel really sees is the serial number that the date represents. Well, how does it come up with serial numbers? Well, it's very simple. The very first date that Excel knows how to work with is January 1st, 1900. Any dates prior to that, Excel just treats as regular numbers. So if you want to do math with dates, they have to be dates that happened after January 1st, 1900. Now, what do I mean by doing math with dates? Well, to determine somebody's age, you would subtract their date of birth from the current date. To figure out how long somebody's been employed in your company, you'd have to subtract their hire date from the current date. So you have to be able to do math with dates, but Excel can't do math with any dates prior to January 1st, 1900. That said, January 1st, 1900 being day number 1, here's the serial number that represents that date. Notice that the formatting is general. If we change this to a short date, Excel converts the serial number to January 1st, 1900. Day number 2 to Excel is January 2nd, 1900. We can do the same thing here and convert that to a date, and it'll display January 2nd, 1900. Well, what about this date here? 40,471. Well, that's how many days have passed since January 1st, 1900 to today as I record this video. Today's October 20th, 2010. So if we convert that number to a short date, sure enough, October 20th, 2010. Now we come to this number. In the practice worksheet, to humanize, this represents the date of 1942, September 23rd. But all Excel is going to see there is a serial number. So if we convert this to a date, we get all these pound signs indicating that the value in the cell is too wide for the column width. But you know what? If you widen this way out, you'll see that it's still too wide. In fact, that date is so far in the future that Excel just loses its marbles and can't display it properly. So the long and short of it is that even though we know that that's supposed to represent a date, let me undo that. To Excel, that's a serial number that it can't even work with. That's the problem that we're going to encounter with a column of numbers in this exercise. All right, let's take a look at another part of the exercise before we get to it. And that's the objective of putting a date together from its 3 separate parts, year, month, and day. We use the date function to do that. To demonstrate this, I'll just fire up the insert function button and then choose the date function and click OK. We'll put in the year, that'll be here. The month, that's this one. And the day, that's the 23rd. And there we go. Why are we doing this right now? Because I want to point out that this really isn't a date either. It's a formula that returns a value that's formatted as a date. In the exercise we'll be doing in a moment, we're going to need to convert this formula into an actual date. The way we'll do that is to copy the formula. I'll just right-click and choose Copy, and then paste the value that we see here over top of the formula. We can right-click on it and choose Paste Value. If you check this in the formula bar, you'll see that the formula is gone now, and in its place is just an actual date. Okay, that should be enough to get us started. Let's go do the exercise. If you'd like to work along with me at home, open the Project Files folder, Lesson 4 folder, and then Text to Columns, and we're currently on the Dates worksheet. Here's a real-world example of how to use the Text to Columns feature in combination with the date function that we learned about in Lesson 3. In column C, we have a list of dates. Well, if you look carefully, you can tell that they're dates. Here's 1942, the 9th month of the year, and the 23rd day. Now, we can figure that out, but Excel can't because it's not in a format that Excel can work with. This worksheet came to us from a mainframe. We had no control over the way the dates were put in here, but now we need to do something with them so that Excel can work with them. Why would we want to do that? Well, if you want to find somebody's age, you'd have to take their date of birth and subtract it from the current date. Excel won't be able to do that with the values in column C because to Excel, these aren't dates. So how do we do it? Well, it's a two-step process. The first thing is we have to break up these numbers into the 3 parts of the date, year, month, and day. And then we have to reassemble all 3 parts into an actual date using a function. So for the first part, we're going to use the Text to Columns feature. Now looking down over this column of numbers, we can see that everything here is exactly the same number of digits, with the exception of these zeros down here, which are going to cause errors for us in a few minutes. But for now, I'm not worried about that. We'll take one problem at a time and start by splitting this up into 3 separate columns. Now, since we're going to split it into 3 columns, we need to have 3 blank columns to the right of the values. So D, E, and F, well, they meet the criteria. They're all empty. So let's start here by selecting the first date and then use the keyboard shortcut Shift and Shift down arrow, and then use the wheel on the mouse to scroll back up. Now we'll go to the Data tab and click on Text to Columns. The values are fixed width. They're all the same number of characters. So we'll choose Fixed Width and click Next, and then use the mouse to slice these values up. We need a slice right after 1942 and one right after 09. Click Next. We'll go ahead and accept the default general format and choose Finish. Well, that wasn't too hard. Now we need to be able to put it all back together as a single date. To do that, we'll use the Date function. Click in cell F2. Now we'll fire up the Insert function button right off of the formula bar, and we're going to go a-searching for the Date function. Type Date, and then click Go. With Date selected, click OK, and here's the 3 different arguments we need. The year is going to be right here in cell C2. The month is going to be here in D2, and the day is going to be over here in cell E2. Click OK, and Excel cobbles all 3 pieces together into a single date. Now we're going to double-click the fill handle to copy all those dates down to the bottom of the list. The pound signs indicate that there are some values here that are too wide for the column. Double-click on the border between F and G to resize the column automatically. Now we're almost home, but keep in mind that these are not dates. They look like dates, but to Excel, they're just the product of a formula. Now we need to convert the formula results into actual dates. And why do we need to do that, you ask? Well, watch, because we intend to delete columns C, D, and E. When we get rid of these, now your formulas don't have anything to work with, so they just return a reference error. That means that we're simply going to have to convert those formulas into the values that they represent. Let me undo that, and we'll take care of business. We'll go ahead and select this column again, Shift N, Shift down, and then we're going to copy that, Control C, and then paste over top of the copied cells just the values that the formulas represent. To do that, we're going to go back to the Home tab, click the bottom part of the Paste button, and then choose Values from the Paste options there. It looks the same, but if you click on one of these dates and then look in the formula bar, you can see that the formula is gone and the date's left in its place. Hit Escape on the keyboard to turn off the marching ants, and now we can go ahead and delete these 3 columns right here. And finally, what happened to those 0 values we talked about? Well, I mentioned that there was going to be errors because of those, and we can see those here. This pound sign number, that was generated by the formula because the formula was trying to pull together a date from 3 pieces that didn't exist. It was looking for a month, a day, and a year, and all there was a 0 in that original column, so it returned an error. But we can get rid of these easily enough. Now, we could just delete these guys, but we're going to use the Find and Replace option to do it instead. We'll click on Find and Select, and then choose Replace. In the Find What box, we'll type in pound, N-U-M, exclamation point. And we're going to replace that with nada, not a thing. Click Replace All, and Excel goes through the worksheet and makes 6 replacements. Click OK, and then close the box, and they're all gone. Well, yes, of course, we could have just taken each one of those 6 cells and deleted them. But remember, if you had 6,000 names and dates in your worksheet, you wouldn't want to do those individually. So Find and Replace is actually a very good tool to help get rid of stuff like that.